Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast, a podcast where we explore the innate connection between the mind, the body and the soil. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Smartsoil. Smartsoil is an online education platform creating courses and providing resources from farmers for farmers. Join us as we share the stories and experiences from those dedicated to regenerating ecosystems, communities and human beings. All right, this week on the Mind Body Soil podcast, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Dr. Jalal Khan. Been really looking forward to this conversation, and after going and coming across Dr. Jalal's work through some collaborations with Jake Wolke and seeing that there's doctors that actually care about farmers and good food and a lot of other things, I was just so drawn to his work. So I've been checking out a lot of the quantum health stuff. And I'll tell you what, it is really cool. So pumped that you're here, Jalal, and thanks so much for jumping on tonight, mate.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. It's an absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to this.
Awesome, brother. Hey, if we could just start, I'd like to just start with a bit of an impactful moment or a something that, you know, really set you onto the path. I know maybe we even want to just give the listeners a little bit of context about where you're coming from with the dentistry background, and then something that's really flipped the switch for you and got you going down this path that you're on now.
Yeah, look, life, the switch really flicked when I knocked that six on the second last ball of the over to get my first century, and I've just never looked back ever since. That was in the backyard, but no, in all seriousness, I'm a dentist. I've been a dentist for 10 years now. I've got a beautiful family with two young children and a wife that puts up with all the shenanigans and madness that I ask of her from a quantum health perspective, which we might touch on as we get into the conversation. But I guess what happened was, for me, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that centralized dentistry was failing patients who were in serious pain with their faces and their jaws and TMD, TMJ issues. So TMJ is like the temporomandibular joint, which is kind of like that joint right in front of your ear, the ball and socket joint, where your jaw uses to open and close. And so when I started to kind of unravel and unlearn all of the things that I had been taught, it took me on a journey of unlearning and then relearning. And so that kind of brought out the curiosity in me as a health clinician, because it's kind of battered out of us whilst we are being trained. We're just trained to stick to guidelines and regulations, and we're told like specific prescriptions on how to treat patients for various conditions rather than using our own lateral thinking and critical thinking. So once you come out of 7, 8 years of training and you're you're exhausted, you just want to get out there and work and help people. But then you're also so heavily programmed with this prescription on how you need to treat people. And all the curiosity and excitement is battered out of you. It's pretty hard to find that again. So I was just lucky that something piqued my curiosity about why people got crooked teeth. It's because they got small jaws. So then why are the jaws small in the first place? And so in unraveling all of that, that probably happened 2018 through to 2020. And then 2020 was an interesting time for various reasons. And that piqued my curiosity in the medical side of things. And in trying to help my wife through some health challenges, as well as other family members, I was lucky enough to happen to come across this area of health called quantum biology, which was something I'd never heard of. And when I first heard of it and started to read into it, if I'm honest, I was scared, because like the words quantum scared the shit out of me. What does that even mean? And so that was, I guess, a rabbit hole which I went down. It's a never-ending rabbit hole, but one which is really exciting because it's actually helped me understand and uncover the way that mankind, that we as people actually work as organisms. And it's been an incredibly freeing process, because once you know how a system works, it's so much easier to fix it. And it's so heavily tied to our understanding behind photosynthesis, which is how obviously plants and all foods are grown. And that obviously then takes you to the agricultural sector and trying to connect with regenerative farmers who are inherently decentralized in the way that they approach things because they're not using some sort of single authority to tell them how to do things and what to do and when to do it. And so when you start to delve into decentralized medicine and use your own critical thinking to heal patients, it's only fitting that you start to interact with decentralized clinicians in other industries. And I view farmers as clinicians in a way, in terms of the medicine and the healing modalities that they're able to provide their customers.
Mm. Wow, mate, that's sounds like quite a journey. And can we just zoom in a little bit on what your practice focuses on today then, and how you're treating your patients, as it would, differentiate between how you would treat them before?
Yeah, so previously I was focusing just on teeth. Someone comes in with a broken tooth, you fix it, you put it back together, and off you go. But then once I started to look at the jaws as a bigger picture, I started to do a lot of work in kind of guiding the development of jaws in children, and also helping adults with some of their issues that they might have. And I still do that. And so most of my clinical work these days is dealing with postural issues that people might have where teeth and jaws have a huge role to play. And I'm doing that kind of half of the week. And then the other half of the week, I'm spending time doing my quantum health work. So I have two businesses. One is the dental practice, and the other one is this quantum health coaching that I do for clients, which has turned out to be something which surprisingly is worldwide, because I'm treating patients from all around the world who are seeking help and they're not able to find help with their usual medical practitioners. And it's quite amazing that you can help someone turn their life around, even if you're miles away, just by taking them back to nature and the laws that are associated with Mother Nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Does I want you to sort of give the definition for quantum health, just so people we don't lose them. And then I want to unpack your handle, which is K2 Caliber, and find out the meaning behind that.
Sure. So quantum health is it's an understanding of the way that the smallest particles inside of our bodies actually work. So quantum particles are really, really small particles. And the most common ones that people may remember from high school, or if they did any science at uni, would be electrons and protons. So all atoms on the periodic table are made of electrons and protons. But those electrons and protons behave differently under differing frequencies of light. And so when we are exposing ourselves to, for instance, the sun, that can have a huge impact on the way electrons behave and the way protons behave. And fundamentally, you are a bag of electrons and protons. If we really get down to the nitty gritty and we take away all the the bells and ribbons and wrapping paper, you're just electrons and protons. So if we as health clinicians do not understand how electrons and protons behave under different frequencies of light, what are we doing? And so there's kind of three layers to medicine. There's kind of like the big pharma and surgery as the two main approaches to help people with health. Then there's the functional, so that's what we call allopathic medicine or Western medicine. Then there's one layer down, which is the functional medicine approach or integrative medicine. And this is where the health clinicians are looking for the root cause. And they always believe that the root cause is food, and dietary changes are key towards taking someone back to full health. And there's no doubt about that. Like, you can't heal if you are unwell without changing your diet. But there is another layer, and that is the layer of light. And that is where quantum health comes in. So that's like really getting deep into the weeds, so to speak, under the soil, and understanding that there's the leaves of the tree, there's the tree trunk, but underneath the surface, that's where all the magic happens, and that's electrons and protons interacting with light. So I don't look at the body as like a system of organs or various organ systems. I don't look at the body as like, okay, there's the teeth and there's the liver and there's the this and there's that. All I'm thinking about is what's happening at the cellular level and what's happening inside the cells at a subcellular level between electrons and protons. So that's quantum health.
Yes.
K2 caliber is something which it was my handle on Instagram that I put up ages ago before I even got into any of this, and is paying homage to my heritage, because the K2 mountain is the highest mountain in Pakistan, which is my heritage. And the thing about the K2 mountain is that it's a little bit different to Everest. It's the second highest mountain, and so Everest gets all the glory because it's the tallest mountain. Everyone wants to get to that summit. But getting to the summit of K2 is actually harder. It's technically a harder climb, but it doesn't get all the raps because it's not the highest. And the fact that it's harder also is showing the fact that out of all the climbers that have tried to climb K2 and Everest, there's been a higher proportion that have died trying to climb K2 than Everest. So it's actually a deadlier climb. And so I just, when I learned that, I kind of thought that I want my life to, and the path that I lead to, be one that is of the caliber of K2, where I'm not necessarily going for the glory. I'm going for the path which is less trodden. It might be harder, but for me, it might be the right way to go.
That's beautiful, brother. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Glad I asked that.
You're the first person to ever ask me that.
There you go. And so listeners and people that are watching would probably realize that you are sitting in quite red light, and
Yes.
it is the evening over there where you are on the East Coast. So did you want to just explain the basics of that and the theory behind it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So what happens is, in the 1870s, we came up with the first artificial light globe. But prior to that, the only light that we were ever exposed to after sunset was either moonlight or it was fire. And so what we have done in the last 140 to 150 years is we have created an artificial light, and we are now bathing under that light 24/7, basically. We'll go to sleep for 6, 7 hours a night. But aside from that, we are bathing underneath that light after dinner. We're watching television, the lights are on, we're on our phones, and this light is incredibly damaging to our health, which is changing the way that the electrons and protons are behaving inside of us. And I can definitely get into the weeds of that later. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mimic what it would have been like 300 years ago if you and I were chatting. And that is, there's no blue light. I'm wearing special glasses on my eyes to protect any of the blue light that's coming from the screen as we chat. And then I've got this red light globe in the lamp here, which I have on to allow you to actually see me, but at the same time mimic the frequencies of light that I would have been exposed to if it was 200-300 years ago.
So is that infrared, or is that near infrared, or what sort of?
This is not an infrared, it's just a red light globe. So
Okay.
it's just emitting red light, which is for us, ideally after dark, we should have no light or close to no light. But if there is one frequency of light, which our circadian rhythm, which is the body clock that is driving and timing all the processes inside our body, it's a 24-hour cycle, that body clock. There's one frequency of light that doesn't damage the circadian clock, and that is the red light.
Wow. There's a lot I want to unpack there, but we'll get to that. I think it'd be really cool to sort of take a snapshot, and I think you've set that up really well in sort of painting the landscape for what we'll get into, like you said, getting into the weeds. Before I do, I'm interested, something I wanted to ask personally when you mentioned fire and moonlight, just because I haven't heard it discussed yet in these sort of realms. Moonlight, so the sun, obviously, it gives us all so many amazing spectrums of light, right, that are so important for all of us. and it's lots of different ranges. But what about the moon in that sense? Is there beneficial light coming from the moon? Is it, or is it a
That's
bit
a
different?
really good question and a super hard question. It's actually on my list of things to research. It's not as important as the sun, so we don't necessarily need to actively seek out the moonlight in order to benefit our health. Would it hurt if we were exposed to moonlight? No, because it's a natural light which Mother Nature has created, or made available for us. I do understand that there is correlations between the moonlight and the monthly menstrual cycles for women. Um, that is the only thing that I know that is a connection, and I'm sure there's a lot more to it. It's just one thing I have yet to get around to. But should we look to avoid the moon in order to protect our health? That's definitely not the case. There's nothing wrong with moonlight.
Okay. Yeah, cool. It's just been on my mind. And I guess it's sort of like reflecting the sunlight in a way. But yeah, that's cool. Very, very cool. So I guess there's someone listening to this that wants to, get a better grasp on what we're talking about and how influential these light signals are to our body, and how much of a dramatic effect they can have. Do you want to just run through some of the main, I guess, detriments to bad light, and then maybe some of the benefits of, fixing up your light routine?
100%. So I think the way to lay this out is, first, let's look at the fact that most people on the planet think that if you eat healthier food, you're going to be healthier, and that's the case. But if we dive a little bit deeper, we've got to understand that the food has to be broken down inside our cells into the various parts which the cell can then use in order to do the things that it needs to do, make the molecules that it needs to make for our biochemical pathways to happen. And so that process of breaking down the foods, etc., that happens inside something called the mitochondria. And so the mitochondria is like the power plant of the cell. So all the electrons that have been extracted from food feed into the engine, which is inside the mitochondria. So think of the electrons that food provides as like the fuel that you put in your car. Okay. And that fuel goes to the engine. And so you want that engine to be like purring like a Ferrari. And so there's actually one aspect of the engine inside the mitochondria. It literally revs at 9,000 RPM. And this is like a quantum, meaning small, nano machine, and it revs at 9,000 RPM. And our cells have got like hundreds, if not thousands, of these mitochondrial engines inside them. And the tissues inside of us that have the highest density of these mitochondria are the brain, the heart, and your immune system. So the three most prominent or prolific diseases that we as a society are dealing with are neurodegenerative conditions, cardiovascular conditions, and autoimmune conditions. And I just told you that those tissues have the highest density of mitochondria. There's also another silent epidemic, which is infertility. And in women, the cell with the highest density of mitochondria is the female egg. And so what these power plants are doing is they're producing energy from the electrons that are being extracted from food. And so I think you would definitely subscribe to the idea that proteins and fats are healthier for you rather than carbohydrates or refined sugars. But the reason is that they've got a higher density of electrons. That's why they're healthier. So at the end of the day, it always boils down to electrons and protons. And this is something which it's a completely different angle that we're looking at food from now. So the mitochondria, they're the engines that are dealing with the food electrons, but what they're also doing is they're sensing the environment. And so they're sensing the light in the environment. And so let's say that your electrons are like, although you haven't been to Woolies in a long time, I would assume, but let's say you've gone and you've got a trolley of food at Woolies and you've got it on the conveyor belt, and there's someone at the checkout that's, scanning the barcodes, all right? And they're putting it in the bag. So all the things on the conveyor belt are the electrons. And then the mitochondria is scanning the barcodes of the electrons. So what is the information that those electrons are carrying? They're carrying a barcode of the electromagnetic light spectrum that they were grown in. This is why you have to eat seasonally and locally, because if you're living in Perth, but you're eating food that was grown in Bali, for instance, there's a mismatch because your mitochondria, the engine has got 5 cylinders. And those 5 proteins, we'll think of them as cylinders. And those cylinders are sensing the light that you're exposing yourself to and cross-checking that with the light information that the electrons are carrying and making sure that they're the same. And when they're not, that's when the engine starts to break down and become inefficient. And then that's how smoke starts to come out of the exhaust and shit hits the fan. So that's basically how the mitochondria work. I've tried to make that as simple as possible. So what happens then when we are exposing ourselves to artificial lights, which are completely different to the lights that these foods have grown in? What happens is that each of the cylinders are hypersensitive to blue light. Now, the blue light in screens, the blue light in our ceilings, the blue light in hospitals, all of these lights are damaging to mitochondria, and there's plenty of evidence and research to back that up. But what also it does is blue light slows down, it destroys our body's circadian clock. So the first thing that blue light does is it affects how the engine works because it's not natural light. The second thing it does is it destroys our circadian clock. So we've got 100,000 biochemical reactions that are happening inside our cell every second, 100,000, and they have to be timed to perfection, because what happens from the products of the first reaction, they're going to become the feeding reactants into the second reaction, and that has to be timed to perfection. So what happens when your body loses a sense of time because you're overexposing yourself to blue light? What happens is that those reactions get out of time, and then it just becomes a shit show. And so how do we translate that into something that your listeners might find easier to understand? In our economy, we're exchanging goods and services, right? You go to the dentist for your checkup and clean, you pay a fee, you get a service for it. It's the same for everything. You go to your mechanic, you pay a fee, he fixes your car. What happened if no one had a clock? But what happened if everyone's clock told a different time? It would be an absolute mess. It would be chaos. That's what's happening inside our cells when we are exposing ourselves to blue light. We have absolute chaos, and that is translated into inflammation. So inflammation is really chaos in terms of timing inside the cell.
Holy shit. I've never heard it put like that. That's profound, brother. And I hope our listeners followed along for that, because it's going to get deeper than that, folks. Where
my goal is that everybody has to maybe take a second take at listening to it, because if I make it super, super easy and don't really get into the weeds, then the gravity of the message will not hit home. And I'm actually not here to talk to you, Davids, about your health, if I'm honest, because that's your responsibility. And what I'm here for is actually for your children's health. I'm here for the children. That's the most important reason why I have chosen to get into quantum health, because it is the hardest type of health to try and explain to people, but it is the absolute truth. And the reason it's the absolute truth is that it's based in maths and physics. And maths is never wrong. 1 + 1 always equals 2. No matter what language you speak, no matter what culture, everybody knows 1 + 1 equals 2. So when you base a health paradigm not on dogma, not on who is right, but on what is right, you know that that health paradigm is correct. And I am very passionate about speaking to adults so that they can change their light environment, so that they can change their relationship with light. Yes, for the sake of their health, but more for the sake of their children's health, because the children are the next generation, and we need them to be as healthy as possible so that they can think critically, so that they can make the best decisions for their families as they're growing, so that they can make the best decision for you, David, when you're an old fella.
Oh mate, 100%. And I think everyone listening to this can resonates with that, because if you have children, you know that you would do anything for them, and the
Exactly.
very last thing you ever want to be doing is harming them, especially if you can control that. They're exposed to so much shite nowadays that is out of our control, probably a lot through the means of technology and that runaway. But what we can control, like you're saying, the light environment, the way that we set up our houses, and the activities that we do at what time of the day, and those sorts of things. Because, I know a lot of parents that will go above and beyond to feed their children good food, right? And I think that's as far as the understanding has sort of got to. So I'm loving that there's people like yourself out there exploring this next step. And obviously it's so important as well. So I want to go down into the children, and why that's important and how it ties back to farming, especially in sort of what we've done to date, with epigenetics and that sort of thing. But just while we're on this subject, could you just maybe rattle off a couple of imperative things or core things that people can do to perhaps better their environment, simple sort of little tricks that they might be able to do to start correcting some of that confusion?
Yeah, sure. So the number one thing is to change your relationship with light. And so we have to understand that the way our body tells time is from the blue light of the sun. So the blue light of the sun changes throughout the day. It's low at sunrise, and then it peaks around solar noon, which is, close to midday, 1 o'clock. And then it tapers back down to zero at sunset. And so our eyes are constantly sensing that changing blue light inside the sun. So what happens if you're wearing sunglasses? That signal never gets in. And so sunglasses, I don't know if you're into cryptocurrency at all, but sunglasses are a shitcoin. Okay. There's no two ways about it. If you want, I could spend another hour going into the science, but I'll lose everybody.
Yeah.
But hopefully I've showed enough credibility for people to think that, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I've got to toss out my sunglasses. I don't care if they're Ray-Bans. I don't care if they're, Emporio Armani's or whatever. They've got to go. Don't throw them out. Just put them in the bedside drawer. But what is the problem with sunglasses? Okay, so the sun is a source of all energy on this earth. So how can we possibly think it's normal to block into our eyes, and the eyes are the window to the soul? How can we think it's possibly normal to block the source of all energy on this earth coming into our eyes? And yes, there's a lot of fear that is portrayed in Australia about the sun and the damaging effects of the UV, etc. But we have the ability to make our own sunscreen. It's called melanin. And so melanin is like a pigmented molecule. It's like a colored molecule. I have been blessed to have a lot of melanin thanks to my heritage, and many years on the cricket field. But it doesn't mean that you can't make melanin, David. Like, trust me, I've taken patients and clients with a similar complexion to yours, and they're looking pretty close to being my brothers now.
Wow.
So it's possible. But how do we make melanin on our skin? We make melanin on our skin by exposing the skin to UV light. But what actually happens is when we get UV light into our eyes, it actually sends a signal to our skin to lay down more melanin. So you actually burn more in the sun if you are wearing sunglasses, because you're stopping that signal of the UV light into the eye, telling your skin to lay down more melanin. How crazy is that?
Man.
So if you want to stop sunburn, which is totally cool. I get it. No one wants to sunburn. It's not pretty. Um, you need to take your sunglasses off. And what you need to do is you need to build what's called a solar callus, which is an ability for your skin to handle UV light. And the best way to do that is to start slow. Expose yourself to morning light, because morning light doesn't have any UV light. And so you just work your way into it. And then whilst the farmers are out doing their work on the land, you know, it might be midday, take your shirt off for 10 minutes and then pop it back on. And then the next day, take your shirt off for 20 minutes and pop it back on. And I'm not saying that once you've built your solar callus, that you spend 2-3 hours out in the strong sun in the middle of the day and burn, because you will. It's just about being responsible about it. Give yourself dosed exposures of UV light and then put your clothes back on. And I'm sure you can attest to this. If you look at your animals, they're not out in the sun all day. They spend time in the shade. So they're practicing safe sun exposure. And so we need to do the same as well. We're not saying spend 8 hours in the sun. It's more about dosing yourself carefully. So I'd really like your listeners to embrace the sun. It is the source of all energy on this earth, and your skin is a solar panel. I'd go as far as to say that when we as a species put clothes on thousands of years ago, for our health, it was the dumbest thing we ever did.
Wow.
So the skin is a solar panel. It needs to see the sun. Toss the sunglasses out. And the other thing, the best way to reset your circadian clock, because we've all been bathing in blue light, and we've been bathing our eyes in blue light. The best way to reset the circadian clock is to watch sunrise. Like, that's the number one hack. Watch sunrise and all your hormones will click into gear. If your hormones are out of whack, they'll click into gear with watching sunrise. And then the last thing is that there's no point doing any of that if you don't block blue light after sunset, like I am right now.
Yes.
So get some blue light blocking glasses. Happy to supply you with some information for the show notes or something about that.
Please, yep.
For your listeners to be able to buy some glasses to protect themselves and their children.
Amazing. I'll definitely be on that list, mate. Wow. About the sun exposure, there's a couple of things. So I've been practicing this for the last couple of weeks. Since I've been inspired by your post as well, stacking those sunrises. But where my sun comes up here, it comes up behind some carry trees. So I wonder about the light filtering through. Am I still getting that effect, even if it's, I know someone said maybe it's once it gets to 10 degrees, it starts to shift into a different form of light.
That's a really good question. So like the sun is it's got multiple spectrums of light inside of it. So it's got the rainbow Roy G bit, but it's also got infrared light and it's also got UV light. And whenever you are in the sun, there's one spectrum of light that's always going to be there, and that's red light or the infrared light. Okay. But there's the UV light is not always going to be there. So there's an app that you can download, which is called Circadian, and it's on the Apple and Android shops. CIRCADIAN, Circadian.
Mm-hmm.
And once you type in your location, you can set up notifications where the Circadian app will actually tell you when UVA light comes out and when UVB light comes out. And so when you get those notifications, go outside for 10 minutes, shirt off, no glasses, no contacts, no sunglasses. So I want naked eyes. And that's a good way to program your hormones and program all your biochemical pathways. At the end of the day, the light is a wave. And so it's an electromagnetic wave. And so even if the sun's coming up behind trees or behind some sort of structure, it can, because it's a wave, it can travel over trees and still get to you. So you just need to be outside and you just need to be facing east, and all the important light signals will get to you. With regards to sun gazing, there's conjecture over whether you should look at it or not. I personally do spend a little bit of time early morning looking directly at the sun, but I've been doing this for a while, so I would not advise listeners to get straight into that. But if you're just looking in the direction of the sun, and you might be 10-15 degrees to the left or the right of the sun, that's just as good, because the light's still going to get in your eyes.
And how important is earthing in that process? So bare feet on the ground while you're getting that light? Because that's another signal as well, isn't it?
That's a great question. It's super important because you're harvesting electrons from the earth, and at the same time, you've got exposure to the sun to help activate and move those electrons inside of you. So it's like a double whammy.
Mm, so cool. So so we're not only getting electrons then from our food. I mean, that is what everyone has been told for so long, that we're actually getting it from light and from the earth as well when we're grounded.
So we're getting electrons from food, we're getting electrons from grounding, and the sunlight activates electrons inside of us that might have been sitting there dormant. So those are the three sources of electrons. So what happens when you have a deficiency of sunlight and you have a deficiency of grounding? You need to eat more food then.
Mm,
Isn't there an epidemic of obesity in society these days?
yeah.
Layer onto that you're eating processed foods, we as a society are, which are not necessarily grown inside sunlight. They're grown in factories or in greenhouses, etc., etc. So they're not getting the full spectrum of the sun. And so the processed foods themselves are actually deficient in light information because it's not the proper photosynthesis. So then you need to eat more processed food to get the same amount of light that you might get from a 200-gram steak.
So it's not just empty carbs. It's actually empty of electrons or
Light, it's
photosynthetic
empty of
light.
light.
Wow, that's so cool. And I think I can feel people getting excited already listening to this. So they're like, okay, no, maybe this guy isn't crazy, man. He knows his shit. Um, that's cool, man. So I've one thing that I've really enjoyed but lately is seeing you and Dr. Pran and Dr. Max Goulet and working with farmers, or at least taking an interest. And you guys are doing a really cool event coming up this weekend. We can perhaps plug it, but I don't know if we'll have this edit out by then. But I'm sure there'll be more. But what has sparked that interest in farmers and wool farming, and obviously that whole importance, and how does it sort of plug into, I know it fits into health. Obviously, it's really important, but there's not many doctors that are really working in that space or going out onto farms. So, how did that come about?
Well, I mean, I've been lucky to become great friends with Dr. Pran, and he's really kind of taken me back to soil. I've kind of taken him to the light side of things, and he's taken me back to soil. So we both complemented each other nicely. Um, and so I was lucky to go down to Jake Walke's farm at Albury earlier this year in February, and went on a farm tour. And for me, that was like a paradigm shifting moment in my life, similar to the paradigm shifting moment that I experienced when I started to understand quantum biology. Like visiting a farm properly was that powerful for me. And the reason was because I was just like, holy shit, like, look at the food that I've been eating my whole life. I have no idea who's grown it, how it's being grown, what are the conditions. Um, I was born and bred city slinger. So, like, we're not trained to think like this as city people that are born and bred, and let alone as clinicians where we're guiding patients on health and nutrition. I mean, nutrition's basically been written out of medicine. So to to attend the farm tour and really understand the regenerative practices that Jake has implemented was just paradigm shifting for me. And it's like, how can I eat any other meat but regeneratively grown meat? And on top of that, I would go as far as to say that I need to go and meet the farmer. I need to shake his hand. I need to understand what it's all about. And that's kind of been something which has, yeah, massive paradigm shift for me. And I'm so blessed to have been introduced to the regenerative agriculture space. I knew that it was important. We all know that it's important. And we kind of, from an outsider's perspective, we think, oh, it's important for the environment, because it's regenerative and it's, environmentally protective, etc. Although there's, some interesting ideas around growing cattle these days or herding cattle these days, but we won't get into that. But yeah, I mean, if there's anything that's good for the carbon footprint, it's cattle, isn't it, in terms of sending carbon back into the ground. Um, and yeah, so for me, it was not just a paradigm shift about understanding how it was good for the environment, but how it was also good for us, but also the aspect about animal welfare, which I think is key because, I mean, if we're not being treated right as men and women, then surely we're in a bad mood, we're a bit depressed, and we're low on dopamine, and we might have addictive behaviors, we might not look after ourselves, etc. Like, surely that's the same for animals, right? And so if we're depressed, we're low on light. So if animals are mistreated, they're low on light. And so if we're eating animals that have not been managed with their welfare in mind, then the animals that we are eating have a bad light energy about them, a depressive light energy about them, and we will absorb that into our tissues and we will start to embody that. And I firmly believe that that is the case. And I firmly believe that that is a driving factor behind some of the health outcomes that we're seeing in the medical illness or mental health, not medical illness, in the mental health space, where mental health is exploding because people are bathing under blue light, they're not getting any sun, and they're eating crap food. I mean, just on the sun, like we make something called beta endorphin when we are in the sun. And beta endorphin is an opiate. And we all know that opiates are addictive. So we've actually been wired to be addicted to the sun. That's why we feel good. And let me tell you that blue light, this artificial blue light, this research is out, it destroys your dopamine levels.
Yeah.
So there's an epidemic of mental health issues. And a lot of it is tied to dopamine because everyone's bathing under blue light and no one's getting any sunlight.
Which is funny because a lot of people, I mean, you make that correlation between not the blue light, but more the what you're consuming, right? On these platforms and things. But really it could be more down to the actual light itself being detrimental.
Because tissues hold light energy inside of them, just like plants hold light energy inside of them called photosynthesis. Tissues do as well. So like in medicine, there's stories where like someone's had a heart transplant, and when they got the new heart, the entire personality changed. And like I'm not making that up. That's like you can Google that or DuckDuckGo that. But but what I'm trying to say is that the tissues are they have a memory inside of them, and that memory is stored in the water inside the tissues. And 99% of the molecules inside our body are water. So the bonds between the water molecules and the way that those bonds are arranged are actually storing memory of a previous existence. So when you are eating a tissue of an animal that hasn't been treated well, you are taking on the negative energy that is contained within the water inside that tissue. That can't be good for you.
Which has been a hunch, and it's a talking point amongst the regenerative circles. I mean, you speak to farmers, and we've even had people on this show that have mentioned that, like the energy in which is put into animals, but not explained with this quantum theory. So it's I think this is the missing link in a lot of senses to our understanding of what's at play here.
Understanding quantum field theory and being able to apply it is foundational to every single industry on the planet. It's absolutely foundational. These are the laws of nature. All these Einstein laws, E equals mc squared, the theories of relativity, Brownian motion, the photoelectric effect. These are all laws of nature, which Einstein has uncovered. There are other theoretical physicists who have also uncovered other aspects to quantum physics, and there's quantum health, but there's also quantum farming. Like photosynthesis is a quantum process. Yes. And it's super exciting because once you understand quantum field theory, you can kind of explain so many things in so many industries where people have a hunch, as you said, but they just don't know how or why.
Just interested to hear your thoughts then in how is there anyone that you know of that is applying these the quantum theory to farming and I mean, directly and that you've come across yet, or is this something that is yet to happen?
Well, the things that cross my mind would be, I think with it, unknowingly regenerative farmers are, because they're obeying nature's laws, and they're not trying to extract everything from the soil without trying to give back to the soil. So there's got to be that synergy. So I think that's happening. I think there's other areas like, I mean, forgive me if I get the terminology wrong, but is it electro permaculture or something to that effect?
Electroculture, I believe.
Electroculture.
Yeah.
That's definitely um, a quantum application, because
Okay.
copper wires or antennas that are connected to copper wires near plants are harvesting electrons from the ether and then driving that towards any plant that's in close proximity to it. So then those plants have more electrons that can be activated by the sunlight. And so
Wow.
that's why those plants have become a growing bigger. You end up with a bigger cucumber or a bigger piece of fruit.
Hmm. Yeah, it's still I saw someone post something about one of those antennas in the regenerative agriculture group on Facebook, and gee, cop some flack. Which is why it can be hard to, communicate these things sometimes, because automatically the mind's saying, no, this is, that can't be true, and
So the fundamental issue with society these days is that there's a lack of curiosity and there's a lack of humility, because people are not willing to ask questions. And if they do get presented with a question or a scenario that is questioning what they believe to be true, they don't have the humility to even consider that it could possibly be true. And we see that not only in the areas of society that are fast asleep, so to speak, but we also see that in the supposedly awake and aware but arrogant as fuck community. There's no big deal that you're awake and aware, because everybody was asleep at some stage. But you have to have the humility to accept that there's a whole, I mean, there's a whole bigger world out there, universal consciousness, which is running the show. And this might sound like woo-woo and stuff, but like once you get into quantum field theory, it's not woo-woo. This all makes sense. And I just gave you a scientific explanation behind why electroculture actually works, because it drives electrons closer to the plants, so then the UV light can activate those electrons through the photoelectric effect, which Albert Einstein won the Nobel Prize in physics for in 1922. So it's not woo-woo.
yeah, that's it. So have some humility, all right, and have a listen. That's
That's it.
it's bloody awesome. I think it's really, really exciting because a lot of farmers, especially the big names in regen ag, that one of the fundamental things is that they'll repeat over and over is, we are light, we're harvesting light through photosynthesis. So the more plants you have, the more, photosynthetic area you have exposed. So you're essentially, to tie it back to the human body, you're growing more skin to be exposed to then harvest more light, which then is obviously then feeding all those hormonal processes that are happening in the biology. And I think that's where I think we've gotten to like the sort of community understanding at the moment is like it's all biology, 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 but without tying these light to it, it breaks down. So I just think this is really cool.
So the message is, it's not biology. The next step down from that is biochemistry. It's not biochemistry, it's biophysics. So the entire Mother Nature runs off maths. It runs off physics. Maths is the alphabet A, B, C, but physics is the language that you make from the alphabet. And it expresses itself through the way that Mother Nature drives energy flows. And you see that in the way that a tree trunk can branch into branches and then twigs and then leaves. And that same pattern is underground with the tree's root system. And that same pattern is found in the way that our arteries and veins branch inside of us. So it's that same pattern of nature throughout all living beings. I mean, this is a controversial thing, but I like to ruffle feathers, if you don't mind.
Go for it, brother.
Okay, so we're pretty similar to plants. So if you look at the chlorophyll molecule and you look at the hemoglobin molecule, duck, duck, go search it. They're basically the same. The only difference is the chlorophyll molecule has magnesium in it, and the hemoglobin molecule, which is in our red blood cells that carries oxygen, that has iron in it. So if we're creating photosynthesis and food via chlorophyll, are we not also creating energy by exposing a very similar molecule to the same source? We would be if we were exposing ourselves to the sunlight. And are we better at producing energy than plants? We are, because iron has 26 electrons, magnesium only has 12. Once again, it's a story of electrons. The more electrons you have, the more efficient you are at making and flowing energy.
Oh man, that's so cool. I've been thinking that we're mushrooms, but we're actually plants. There you go.
Well, look, I mean, I think we're a bag of electrons and protons at the end of the day. I think we're everything. Like there's bacteria in us, there's viruses in us, there's microbiome inside of us. The microbiome communicates with light. That's how trees talk to one another. Everything really boils down to how light is running the show. And the more we respect that and understand that, the better we'll be for it.
Absolutely, mate. I want to just change gears a little bit and talk about some of the damages unknowingly, not that we've just done to ourselves, but on our farms and to our landscapes, which in some ways, and it's one of the themes that we explore quite regularly here, is that is just a reflection of the damage that we've done to ourselves, in a sense. So we have healthy farmers, we have healthy landscapes in a way, which is probably explainable through this whole quantum approach, I'm sure. But just tying it back to the kids and then this next generation, and seeing some of the autoimmune disorders and all these crazy allergies and things that are just springing out of seemingly nowhere, but are hockey sticking like never before. I guess I'm chasing a not just a story of doom and gloom, but a story of some hope that we can apply for these children.
Good question, mate. Good question. So there's the genetics approach to health and medicine, which is a thinking that genes drive everything that happens to us. Oh, I got bad genes, that's why I got cancer. Oh, I got bad genes, that's why I've got no hair. But then there's also the epigenetics, and epigenetics is about how the environment can dictate how the genes are actually processed and read inside our body. And epigenetics for me probably represents 90, if not 95% of all the health outcomes we are seeing today. Because
Wow.
I was talking with Dr. Pran the other day and I asked him, I said, I know the gut shortened as we were evolving as Homo sapiens. I said, how long did it take for the gut to shorten? He said the distal gut, meaning the end part of the gut, the colon, it took 4 million years to shorten. And that was according to the changes in the food and our ability to maybe be better hunters and gatherers and go for different types of foods, etc. So I said to him, I said, you know how long it's taken for us to go from no artificial light to absolute bathing in artificial light? I said 140 years. So look at the disparity.
Mm.
So when all of the autoimmune conditions that we have, all of the metabolic issues that we have, all of the degenerative conditions that we have, surely the electromagnetic fields that we have created for us that are artificial must have a role to play. Because compared to 100 years ago, and when I say electromagnetic fields, I'm talking about Wi-Fi, I'm talking about Bluetooth, I'm talking about AirPods, I'm talking about artificial lights themselves, I'm talking about 3G, 4G, 5G. If you couple all of those together and you compare the amount of artificial electromagnetic frequencies that we have now compared to 100 years ago, we have a billion times more artificial electromagnetic frequencies. So that's 10 with 18 zeros after it. And no one in health is taking that seriously, or not enough of us are. So if we want to change the health outcomes for our children, we need to change the light environment that we are exposing themselves to. And not just the light that we can see, but also the light that we can't see. Turn your Wi-Fi off when you go to sleep. Don't use Bluetooth anymore. Apple Watches, all this type of stuff, it's all extra electromagnetic frequencies that we don't need. Do we really need something to tell us how many steps we walk?
Mate. This is a bit of a selfish question, but it may help settle some debates around my household. But so smartwatches, right? That
Garbage.
light, garbage. Yeah, yeah.
Chuck it back.
Chuck it out. Yeah, that's what I
What
mean.
does
So
SMART stand for? Do you know what
oh,
SMART stands for?
depends if it's Smartsoil or not, because
No, it's definitely not. I'm not talking about that smart soil. I'm talking about the smart devices. I think it stands for like surveillance, monitoring, and something technology. Like
mm,
it's pretty sinister stuff.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Name change coming in hot. No. Yeah. So that light, that's because my partner's watch sometimes like wakes me up because I'm seeing it like just pulsing light, like green light
Yep,
into that meridian point. So I've been telling her to ditch it for a while, and
it has to.
she thinks,
It's a health hazard. It's a
okay,
health hazard.
yeah, because that's another thing. It's a hunch that I've felt, intuition saying, hang on, it's not right.
You know what
Okay,
I've seen? I've seen the more that people return to nature, the better their gut instinct becomes. Their hunches are better. More and more of their hunches are right. And
shit,
I just feel that they're just dialing back into the original code of nature.
yeah, yeah,
But when you bathe in artificial light and you're working on level 32 in Sydney CBD, working as, I don't know, an accountant or something like that, um, and slaving away for, Uncle Sam or Uncle Albo, then uh, your gut instinct is just completely off because you're completely disconnected from the source.
you just get further and further down that. Wow. So in that case, the people that are that far away I guess, is it then just like a process of elimination for them to just start cutting out, because for a lot of people, it's going to be too much to just go, okay, well, I got to get rid of the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, I change all the lights in my house, get off the phone in the afternoons or the after sunset, um, get some blue blockers, those sorts of things. So in terms of importance or process of elimination of just doing less harm, so doing less of the bad activities, what would you rate sort of in importance there, or where should people start if they just want to do one thing to start with and then get a response and be like, holy shit, there's something here, and then they can start, implementing different practices.
That's a really good question. And before I answer, I want to say I think what you've highlighted is the key, is that more of health is not about addition, it's about subtraction. It's about subtracting the stuff that is bad for us. Now, the number one thing that you need to subtract is blue light. And so there are phone settings that you can change on your iPhone. There are softwares that you can download on your Android, which can eliminate all the blue light that is coming out of the phone. So you can still use your phone, but there's no blue light coming out of it. So that protects your circadian rhythm. Don't change your light globes at home. Just turn them off and put on some candles.
Yeah, yeah,
You might give your wife an extra kiss before you go to bed, and everyone will be in a happier mood. The kids will settle down. They won't be as wired
mm,
because they're not being hammered by that blue light. Trust me, kids' behavior changes when you turn off the lights after dark in a good way.
yeah,
Um, and look, obviously, safe and responsible sun exposure, which we've touched on today,
mm-hmm.
that's number one. But number two, you have to block that blue light. It's non-negotiable. We can do another whole pod where we talk going deep on the blue light if you want, if the
Love to.
listeners want. But hopefully I've laid it out that in enough of a way to say that you got to do it.
Mm,
Those are probably the two main things. Like you can continue eating garbage if you must. But your metabolism will change and improve just from getting more sun and blocking blue light. And then, I mean, it's not hard to take off a smartwatch. So people have just got to do it. They've just got to put that aside, sell it on eBay, let someone else use it, get a bit of coin back, and put that into the blue blockers. And you've got blue blockers for free.
Sounds like a win-win-win to me, brother.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, if anyone's interested in doing that, changing those settings on their phone or their iPhone, I know you did a really cool chat with the other dentist. His name escapes me.
Dr. Ron.
What's his name? Yeah, it might have been. And he talked about how to change those settings on his. He did it with you on the call, I'm pretty sure. But
I've got a reel on my Instagram which walks
cool.
people through it.
Awesome.
But I can also give you a link for some show notes about that if you want. I think that's an absolute key though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done that, and I don't know if it's working yet. But definitely my circadian is too good. I don't know if it's the roosters that are just waking me up extra early, but I'm definitely springing up more than it was. So thank you, man.
Good.
Personally, so
Pleasure, mate.
man, there's so much already that we've covered in this, and I'd love to do a part two. And I can't wait to meet you in real life and give you a big quantum hug because I think you're changing lives, man. And to be honest, I think this is going to be huge for people as we start to heed the call, because one thing we've also said on this before is, when people hear truth, it resonates deep in there. And even if it goes past the first time, or that's something, it moves them. So I don't know if there's something there in that quantum realm that it explains that. I know you've talked a little bit about quantum entanglement.
Quantum entanglement it's my favorite quantum phenomenon of all, because it's basically it's love, and it's so special. But like you and I are entangling right now, and yes, it's over the internet, but we're still entangling, and so I think it's you and I are resonating at the same frequency, which is why you and I have met, and you and I are now talking. And it's like we each have a radio inside of us, and we can change the dial and tune into whatever frequency we want to tune into. And yes, mood and emotion has a role to play in that. But like we can, if we use the Sydney FM stations, we can tune in at 104.1, or we can tune in at 106.5, or we can tune in at 96.1. You and I right now, we're on the same wavelength, which is why we're tuning in. That's like one expression of quantum entanglement. And I've never had someone say to me that what I'm trying to express through quantum health is incorrect. I've never had anyone argue with me. I've had people be silent because they know I'm right and they just don't want to admit it. And a lot of those people that have been silent have been doctors. And that's okay. Much love to them. But I've never had someone actually say, Jalal, you got rocks in your head. Because intuitively, everybody knows that the sun has to be good for you. It's the source of all energy for food. It's the source of all energy on this earth. Everything you see around you is stored solar energy. It was grown under the sun at some stage. That's an axiomatic fact. And so when we respect that, and then you build a health paradigm around that, it's a bloody strong health paradigm, because you don't need supplements. You don't need big pharma. All you need is regeneratively grown food and a return to nature.
Beautiful. I think we finish it there, and we pick this up again, bro. Because if any, my head is, and my heart, it's all pulsating. So yeah, just so grateful that you'd be so open to share what you shared with us today. And did you want to drop? We'll put it all in the show notes where people can find you, where we can find some of the gadgets and things that we've talked about. Did you want to just talk about the event coming up in in Albury?
Yes, I'm honored to have been invited by Dr. Max Culhane to talk about light as being the missing piece of the health puzzle for many. And I'll be speaking down in Albury on Sunday with other esteemed speakers in what is called the Regenerate Health Summit. So I'm super excited about that, about spreading the light, so to speak, and trying to not turn people away from food as being important, but help them realize that food is a very important piece, but light is slightly more important. And when light isn't right, food is not as effective in helping to regenerate health. And you guys are going to such great lengths and great efforts to turn the ship around for agriculture and turn the ship around in terms of food for your consumers. And you got to go all the way. And that means looking after yourselves, because if you're on a plane and the plane's having a bit of engine trouble, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your children. And you as farmers have to do that, so that you can help to continue to provide amazing food for us. The last thing I wanted to say, if you don't mind,
No, please, man.
is that if you are on a health journey and you're not getting served by medicine or functional medicine, it would be wise to approach a quantum health clinician that can help you with really dialing into these laws of nature and restoring things like circadian health. There are a few in Australia. Yes, I am one. You don't have to use me, and I can definitely guide those that are interested into talking with other quantum health clinicians in Australia.
Are there any that come to mind, Jalal, that we can just name drop here, perhaps, that or even if people are just like, holy shit, I want to learn more about this quantum health stuff. Is that
Yeah, sure. So
yeah.
there's probably one that I would recommend as a person that is a good follow for anyone that is on Instagram and Twitter. And she's a beautiful soul. She's quite young, but like super smart, very intelligent, and excellent when it comes to women's health, particularly those that might be on a fertility journey, or there might be menstrual women that might be struggling with menopause or something like that. And her name is Kira Lee Wellness, KIERALEA Wellness. That's her tag on Instagram and Twitter. She's excellent with the women, and she's just got so much love and a lot of soul in what she pushes out as well.
Amazing, man. Just like you do. Hey, Jalal, mate, thank you so much. Really looking forward to catching up again, man, and keep spreading the light.
Much love. Thank you so much, David.